For pushing 22 years now, we've known and played as the Master Chief, Spartan 117. We joined Chief's story really at the end of the Human Covenant War. The entirety of the events that play out across Halo CE, Halo 2 and Halo 3 all take place over a period of just a few months. At the end of Halo 3 he spent over 4 years in cryosleep, was ultimately awoken, and every subsequent game since has taken place sporadically over the period of less than 4 years, actually significantly closer to 3 years and 3 months. But onward from that, the amount of time we've actually played as the Master Chief over the entirety of the Halo franchise so far actually covers a time period of about 15 days. Luckily, the Halo novels extrapolate out on Master Chief's history and the history of the Spartan program as a whole, along with dozens of other individuals across the Halo universe. Master Chief's story starts in 2517 and extrapolates dozens of stories all the way up to the present day in the Halo universe being 2560, in total covering a time period of 43 years. Now, Halo Infinite's future campaign DLCs will inevitably add to Master Chief's journey and his story at large, but just how many years does the Master Chief have left? I've done a couple of videos in the past describing my own personal opinions on how Master Chief should die. If you're interested, I've linked them in the description, but on the assumption that Chief doesn't die, and don't get me wrong, everyone dies eventually, but we do know that Spartans can live significantly longer than the average human being. That was established in the Spartan Field Manual, where Spartan 4 augmentations surrounding gene therapies predicted that Spartan 4's fighting careers would exceed a century. And it is widely accepted that the Spartan 2s, Master Chief being a member of, did receive wholeheartedly more brutal but also more effective augmentations. It has indeed been directly referenced that gene therapies were a part of the Spartan's augmentation sets. And once you factor in that cryosleep stops all metabolic processes in the body, really, as long as a person is kept in the right kind of conditions, they could live for centuries, millennia, or even longer. Hell, when you actually start to factor in Forerunner technologies, that time span goes on indefinitely. And let's be honest, the poetic nature of the end of Halo 3, where Master Chief is just kind of floating ominously out there in deep space in cryosleep to be revived when he's needed, is kind of a nice way for it to go for him, always leaving the door open for the return of the Master Chief. So we have discussed the intricacies of how Master Chief should die, but on the assumption that he doesn't die in combat, how should Master Chief live? Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00. Please excuse my voice today, I've got a bit of a sore throat, but for those of you who like the gruff tones, you're welcome. Anyway, today we're tackling a rather interesting subject and looking at lore by definition kind of outside of the Halo universe, but that suggests that the plan for the Master Chief was always that he was going to exist within a single continuity across all 3 of Bungie's most popular games. So let's look at some deep lore, the numbers, multiple game franchises, and jump into this episode of Lore and Theory. Wind the clock back to 2001 and Halo hit the ground running and became a blockbuster hit almost immediately upon its release. Bungie, the original publisher of the game, would maintain ownership of the franchise, right the way up to 2010 with its final Halo release, Halo Reach. From there, all future development of the Halo franchise was then given to 343 Industries, a separate game studio created by Microsoft to continue to push forward its flagship franchise, allowing Bungie to move on to its own projects. But it's Master Chief's story within the Halo universe that we're particularly interested in here. First things first, as I've previously said, the entirety of Master Chief's story in the games at least takes place over only a 15-day period, by definition. Yes, there are big gaps in between where he's in slip space travelling between places, or he's in cryosleep between, say, Halo 3 and Halo 4, but on the whole, the actual amount of time, the events that took place that we fought through, only took place over 15 non-consecutive days. It sounds kind of unbelievable, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't believe me, but the fact of the matter is this is exactly what the situation is, and I'm surprised that so many people don't know that this is the case, so for the avoidance of doubt, I'll just quickly run through it. Halo CE began on September the 19th, 2552 and lasted 3 days. Halo 2 began on October the 20th, with all events up to jumping out of New Mombasa happening over a single day. The slip space journey in between took a couple of weeks, but we'll ignore that because we didn't actually physically play it. And the emergence from the other side and everything that took place in bringing down regret and ultimately ending up at High Charity and then on our way back to Earth happened over a course of 2 days. So that's 3 days total for Halo 2. Halo 3 began on November the 17th, and all events from Master Chief's recovery in the jungle all the way up to the jump through the portal at Voi also happened over the course of 1 day. The jump through the portal to the Ark lasted just shy of 1 month, but again, we didn't get to play it, so we don't include it. And then all events that happened thereafter, from arriving at the Ark to taking down the Covenant, retrieving Cortana, and destroying the replacement Halo, all happened over the course of 1 day. So that's 2 days for Halo 3. Chief then spent basically 4 years in cryo, and then the events of Halo 4, from Chief waking up aboard the Ford Unto Dawn to basically Infinity leaving Requiem and leaving the Master Chief behind to pursue the Didact, all happened over the course of a day. Then the slipspace jump to the Ivanov station and the battle there took place over the course of a day. Then another subsequent jump from Ivanov station to Earth following the Didact and getting aboard the Mantle's approach and finally defeating the Didact took place over the course of another day. So that's 3 days total for Halo 4. Halo 5 and the missions Ardent Moon, Meridian and Genesis all each take place over a day. That gives 3 days total for Halo 5. And Halo Infinite, everything taking place from Chief's recovery from space by Fernando Esparza all the way through to the defeat of the Harbinger and their translocation away from the Silent Auditorium, took place on May the 28th, 2560, a single day. Now again, we're not finished with Chief's story yet. There's new campaign DLCs that are on the horizon that will inevitably extend Master Chief's story, and we already know that Master Chief's story has been extended comprehensively across the books, spanning a time of 43 years, as I said in the intro. Now the furthest or most future date that we have on record in the lore, at the moment at least, is a date arbitrarily not too distant in the future. The final epilogue of Halo Reach showed Reach with Noble Six's helmet, with a Reach now been terraformed and is now no longer glassed, with an unidentified colony ship in the distance settling Reach for the first time in likely decades. This was dated in 2589. Our current date in the Halo universe is 2560. That means that the furthest future date that we have in the Halo universe at this moment is only 29 years away. Now yes, Master Chief's current age is 49 years old, he's pushing 50. If you look at it chronologically speaking, he was born in 2511, the current year in the Halo universe is 2560, that makes him 49. But you've also got to bear in mind that for large durations of that time, Master Chief was in slip space, or he was in cryosleep, and both of these adversely affect the rate at which you age. Slip space, which is by definition a hyperdimension outside of the normal dimensions of space-time, have its own laws of physics and its own passage of time, so it affects the way in which we age to an unknown degree at this time. However, cryosleep completely and utterly stops all metabolic functions in the body. It effectively stops you from aging, freezing you in exactly the condition you were when you were put into cryosleep. And onwards from this, even foreigner stasis pods that also technically exist in slip space simultaneously also stop physiological aging to a complete and utter standstill. Hell, you've even got to consider that Master Chief's Gen 3 armor allowed him to survive in space for 6 months. Now, it didn't do that by just maintaining his vital signs. Mjolnir just doesn't have a large enough supply of air to be able to provide a Spartan with the air needed to maintain life for a 6-month period with no refueling. And I've speculated on this before, but the likelihood is that Mjolnir Gen 3 itself actually contains, at least when it goes into its survival mode, a form of cryo-suspension built into the armor. And again, Spartans age significantly slower than the average human anyway. In fact, I worked out in an earlier video that it's entirely likely, at least, that most Spartan 4s could live to be over 250 years old. So far we've had a franchise that has existed for 22 years, and during that time we've actually only played as the Master Chief for 15 days of his life. That could be a life in excess of 250 years old if he was just left without the needs for cryo or slip space travel. So at this point, really, Chief's story could continue almost indefinitely into the future, but hey, we're here to actually speculate on exactly how long Chief is going to live for, and we're also going to look outside of the franchise. And where do we start? Destiny. Now, it's of no secret to many avid Destiny and Halo fans that there is a Master Chief Easter egg directly in Destiny's story. At the close of the Taken King, your Guardian gets the opportunity to scan a stasis pod nearby, and this is what is said.
Pod number 10201. A Guardian with exceptional light sealed himself inside. He's been in there for centuries. Before I found you, I tried to resurrect him, but he preferred to sleep. He said the last war was enough for 1,000 lifetimes.
Now that's all well and good, and it could literally just simply be a Master Chief Easter egg, but it's intriguing nonetheless that this is reference that the last war was enough for 1,000 lifetimes, and Chief has been fighting almost non-stop now for decades. But the interesting thing there is that they say that this particular individual has been in stasis for centuries. So that pretty much rules that out. Or does it? I couldn't help leaning into Vsauce there. Now, to ascertain as to whether or not the Master Chief can even be alive during the events of Destiny, we kind of need to know when Destiny takes place. Because obviously if it takes place around the same time, chronologically speaking, then Master Chief can't exist in two places simultaneously. Strictly speaking, he technically could, but that's a different debate. So in any case, we need to figure out as to whether or not Destiny and Halo take place kind of at the same time. I mean, after all, they are both, originally at least, developed by Bungie. Or whether or not one takes place before the other or after the other. We need to find out when Destiny took place. We know when Halo took place. We need to find out when Destiny took place. Now, I can't take any credit for this particular calculation whatsoever. However, upon reviewing this particular calculation, I'm pretty happy with its accuracy. Over on the Destiny subreddit, a user by the name of theRedScholars published a post where they extrapolated out a time frame of which Destiny could be taking place. There's a link in the description for the original post, and I strongly recommend popping along and giving it an upvote. But all in all, they estimated that the range of which Destiny likely takes place is anywhere from 2675 to 3500. Now, they also accept that there are 825 years in between those two dates, but they're just saying that it's a time frame that Destiny likely takes place within. Now, this is great because obviously Master Chief's story currently goes up to 2560. The future-most date in the Halo universe we have is 2589, and Destiny at the earliest takes place in 2675. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still large discrepancies between the universe in that the Traveller was first discovered in the 21st century, and of course the UNSC and the Covenant War happened in the 26th century. So it's not like the two universes perfectly blend together, but there is at least room for Chief's continuity to continue from Halo through into Destiny. And I'm not saying that there's a plan or there ever was an intention to actually bring the Master Chief into Destiny, at least not as a playable character or an NPC, but at least have his presence known through the continuity of the Destiny games. But is that where Master Chief's story ends? Does his story ultimately just come to a close with whatever the hell happens with the Destiny universe? Not necessarily. Bungie worked and developed on yet another game that predates both Destiny and Halo, but also have parallels to both. Marathon, originally released on December 21st, 1994 on the Mac OS, with later additions to that storyline being Marathon 2 Durandal and Marathon Infinity in 1995 and 1996 respectively, was a first-person shooter game that followed the exploits of a security officer aboard a human UESC or United Earth Space Council starship called the Marathon, as it orbited a colony on Tau Ceti 4. And I think you know where I'm going with this. This particular security officer was often referred to as simply the security officer or the cyborg, and occasionally the Marine. And this individual was a 2-meter tall cyborg, sporting green vacuum-enabled battle armor. His official designation was Mjolnir Recon number 54, and is classed as a Mjolnir Mark IV cyborg. Now, yes, of course, there's going to be inspirations and ideas taken from one franchise to another by a single franchise developer. It's not at all surprising, as early Halo, Destiny, and Marathon are all developed by Bungie, that they would take certain inspirations from their previous works and implement them in some degree into their future works. But what if Bungie always intended for the Master Chief to have a single continuity? That is ultimately the question here. But again, we run into this problem of time spans. If Marathon takes place at the same time as Halo, or the same time as Destiny, then the Master Chief's singular life can't have a singular continuity between all three. Well, the very first game is set in the year 2794. Now remember that our time frame for Destiny is anywhere from 2675 to 3500. And this is a very large window of estimation spanning over 825 years. But what if it fell? What if Destiny's events fell towards the earlier end of that spectrum? What if it did happen around the time of 2675? Then we have a single continuity. The Master Chief could be born in 2511 in the Halo universe, survive all the way through the events of the Human Covenant War, the War with the Created, the War of the Banished and into the future, ultimately being put into a stasis capsule of some description in the future, and remaining in that stasis capsule for the entirety of the events of Destiny and Destiny 2, only to be revived a century or more into the future aboard a ship called the Marathon in orbit around Tau Ceti 4. Now don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect blending of universes here, but there does at least have suggestion and possibility of there being a single continuity, at least before 343 Industries got involved with the continued development of the franchise and Halo has grown to the point that it is now. But there's still distinct possibility that the Master Chief could have a single continuity across all three of these Bungie games. The absence of Mjolnir armor on the Master Chief, as he ended up being the security officer in Marathon, could simply be because he was put into stasis without his Mjolnir armor. Yes, Master Chief and his armor have become so synonymous that they're one and the same thing, but there is still a human being inside of that armor and he has still been seen not wearing it on a few occasions. What if, at the close of the War with the Endless, which are already heavily suggested at being precursor in origin, the very creators of life in our galaxy, and thus quite possibly the most significant threat that humanity has ever had to deal with. What if, at the close of this immense battle, Master Chief finally gets some downtime? In a very similar way to at the end of Halo 3, where he enters cryosleep, or a stasis pod, and remains there for a duration. This war with the Endless is so significant that it causes something of a reset for humanity and pushes us all the way back to effectively the equivalent of a 21st century civilization once more. Humanity are already in a bad way in the Halo universe. It's not hard to believe that we couldn't get pushed all the way back to our home planet once more. Then humanity continued to advance once more. A traveller enters the solar system and humanity track it. That heralds in a new golden age for humanity where we expand once more. But the traveller brings with it enemies, and those enemies push humanity back to our last city. Humanity, led by the Guardians, fight for every inch of ground, and at one point a Guardian comes across the stasis pod of the Master Chief contained within. At this stage, so many records have been deleted, humanity has been almost reset so many times that they don't actually know for certain who is within the pod. The name Master Chief, John 117, Mjolnir-powered assault armor, all pass into time immemorial and become myth, all but forgotten. And after whatever events still lay ahead in Destiny, this particular stasis pod finds its way aboard a ship that goes out to the Tau Ceti system. And in orbit above a colony on Tau Ceti 4, this stasis pod unlocks for the first time in centuries. And from it emerges an individual who has been forgotten by time. Maybe tiny fragmented data remains surrounding this individual. Words like Mjolnir, Mark IV get retroactively applied to this individual. And after centuries in stasis, we can't even be entirely sure that this individual would emerge from stasis with all of his faculties in place. Indeed, he may have entered this stasis pod in the first place because he was injured at the close of the final war he fought, the one against the Endless. And further cyborg implants and AI was needed to maintain his faculties, but that still resulted in irrecoverable amnesia. And remember earlier where I muttered that perhaps Master Chief could exist across more than one single timeline at any given time? Well, that could be explained by the events of Marathon Infinite, the third installation of the Marathon series, where that same security officer, this unknown being, is transported backwards and forwards through time in multiple jumps through different realities, with the final closure of this particular story remaining open-ended, left entirely to interpretation. Bungie created Marathon. Bungie created Halo. Bungie created Destiny, and it's completely reasonable to expect that some inspirations and ideas would be used from one to the other. But is it possible, given everything that we've discussed here today, is it even remotely possible that the Master Chief, Spartan John 117, has and does exist in all three franchises? Was this always Bungie's intention? Is Master Chief truly humanity's greatest warrior? This is really just the opening of this particular discussion, and let's really get this discussion going in the comments. There are actually a lot more parallels between Marathon, Halo and Destiny that I haven't covered in this video. But if you want that, if you want a full exploration of all of the connections between all three games, and build on this opening video where we really explore as to whether or not all three franchises can coexist, then again, pop it in the comments and I'll get right on it. And again, if you're new here or you're coming from the Destiny universe or beyond, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. So, until next time.
Thanks for watching. If you're new here and liked what you saw, go ahead and hit that like button and hit the subscribe button while you're at it so you don't miss my future uploads. Links are in the description to get connected and jump into the Discord community with me, and if you really love the content I'm making, consider supporting the channel over on Patreon for tons of awesome perks. Pop your comments down below if you have an idea of what I should cover next, and hang around for the end of the video for other suggested videos you might be interested in. Huge shoutouts to my patrons: Spartan 10148, the metarch of my installation; Falcon, Prophet, Phantom, Thomas, Mikhail and Irrefutable Justice, my monitors; Andrew, Cameron, Darian, Flaming Halo, Madness, Masked Owl, Michael, Spartan 0137, the Cave Potato, Uwu Master and Wolf Eclipse, my sub-monitors; my growing fleet of Strato Sentinels; my ever-vigilant Enforcers; and all the other awesome patrons that are helping to support the channel in a big way. Huge shout out to Todd Morrison for keeping the installation powered with that glorious vacuum energy. Much love to you all, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.